Hello there. So I have, or rather had, a FreeNAS system that I was using for local file storage here at my house. And it's recently given up the ghost in a couple different ways. A couple of the drives failed in the RAID 5 array. And also the system just doesn't seem to want to boot anymore. I had been having some issues with the system booting before, and I think the motherboard has finally just given up the ghost. It was cobbled together with old components that I gathered up and stuff like that. So, not a big deal. Not a big deal on losing the two drives in the array. As you may or may not know, in a RAID 5 array, minimum of 4 drives. If any one of those drives fails, you're fine. You can replace it. But if 2 drives go, then you've lost the array and all the data. I think I can I've been able to boot on another system. I've been able to get the drives up and going long enough, I think, that I can get some data, get the data copied over. But in any case, I have an off-site secondary backup that I can use in the worst case. So anyway, I started to look at either building or buying a pre-made NAS, and I've known about Synology for a while. A lot of people seem to like the Synology NAS boxes, and I've had some experience with QNAP, and I wasn't happy with the QNAP. It just didn't impress me in terms of the interface or the speed of the device or anything like that, and it seemed very buggy. It was a limited experience, and that was from 3 years ago. But anyway, people seem to really like the Synology devices, and they can be quite expensive, though. Your SMB sized NAS can be in the $400, $500, $600 range and up, depending on the capabilities of it. But they do have this DS416j, which is their entry level or geared more towards home users, I guess. Low cost NAS, and this was, I think, $245 on Amazon. I'll have a link to it in the description. But for $245, I don't think you could build something cheaper than that. The drives, the 4 new drives that I got for it were more expensive than the actual NAS. So it'll be interesting to see, even though this is some fairly performance-wise, you may say it's a little anemic, but dual core, it's got, I think, 512 megs of memory. The one complaint that people seem to or the only complaint that people seem to have about the DS416j, there is the 416 and there's 416j. The J is the lower end version, but the only complaint that people seem to have about this model is that its performance using Plex is not very good, and that's to be expected. These wouldn't have the CPU. A lot of NASs wouldn't have the CPU to be able to transcode video through Plex or anything else for that matter. That's not a big deal for me. I do use Plex, but I have a separate server that it runs on. I actually have it virtualized. So I've got plenty of CPU power. This is just for storing files. So even though the media will live on this, that Plex will be using, the actual transcoding will be happening on a separate server, which I prefer anyway. So that's not a big deal. You can get Plex for this, but people have said that it is fairly, depending on the size of the media, the resolution, stuff like that, it can be, and the number of people that you have accessing it, it can be fairly anemic. So anyway, I'll do a quick unboxing, I guess, and then get it set up. And then I've got some actual, I think if I can get the other drives up, I'm going to try to see if I can get the old system to boot up long enough so I can do some quick tests. I want to measure the power that the old system used, and then compare it to and the file transfer speeds, and see how much of an improvement I'm going to get, if any, with this system. Big beefy power supply here. I'm not sure if you can see that, but let's see, 12 volts, 7.5 amps. So nice big beefy power supply there. And I forgot to mention, I'm putting in Seagate. Let's see here. Open one of these up. Seagate 4000VN000 drives. These are 4 terabytes a piece. So depending on the RAID configuration, anywhere between anywhere between 8 and 12 terabytes. I'm effectively going to be doubling the amount of storage I had. The other RAID was RAID 5 with 2 terabyte drives. So, and these are approved for use in this model. Synology on their website has a compatibility list for various drives, which, you know, I can't imagine sticking a drive in this and it not working, but always better, you know, if you're going to be buying something to err on the side of caution and get what's compatible. So we've got a LAN port, that's a gigabit port, a couple USB ports, one of those is a USB 3, a couple fans. Thumb screws are always nice, so you don't have to go hunting for a screwdriver, assuming that the guy before you didn't torque them down using a gorilla. Oh, that's nice. I actually kind of expected that to come off completely, but that is hinged on there, so that's nice. Couple looks like 80mm fans. There's no particular reason why. It actually is etched in the case, hard drive 1, 2, 3, and 4, so you'll know, but I'm just marking hard drive 1 and then just putting the date that I'm installing it, just giggles. So those screws, put them all over the place. Yeah, so it's fairly straightforward. So I'm going to get this powered up, and then put it back there first, and then I'm going to power it up and configure, and then try to pull one running on mouse. This is going to be a comparison of anything like I said, the old system, just called together, parts called together. So it's not like it's going to be a comparison of 2 competing NAS devices or anything like that. It's going to be a comparison of my NAS too. It's going to be a comparison of FreeNAS too, something like this Synology. It'll just be for my own application of actually get the performance out of something. Not necessarily something you can build, because you could probably build something that would give you better performance. Certainly this is a value-based device, but it'll be interesting because this is probably the cheapest commercially available pre-built NAS you can get, as far as I can tell, or as far as I've found. So it'll be interesting to see what this compares to what I had before, at least. So I'm going to get this plugged in and powered and configured, and then I'm going to see if I can get the old one up and running at least long enough to, well, 2 things. One, I'd like to copy the data off of it just because it would be faster than having to go to the remote backup, but then also to do some quick power measurements, how much power the old system drew, and then some quick file transfer measurements just to compare the two. It's not a very good comparison. It's not comparing like the Synology to FreeNAS necessarily, because you can certainly build a FreeNAS box that performs better than this. You can certainly probably get a Synology that would perform better than that FreeNAS that you would build. It's not a comparison of anything other than what I had and what I have now. But it will be interesting to see what the difference is, because this is a 240 or something around there box. You know, it's actually a really good value for what it is. If it performs, you know, halfway decently, if it performs at least as well as my old one, then I think that's a win in that case. If it performs better, then that's a double win. All right, so I got the Synology on the network and powered up, and the setup went fairly easily. I didn't encounter any show-stopping issues or anything. I will note that it does take a while to boot, probably close to it's several minutes. I want to say 5 minutes, but I didn't time it. But it did seem like it does take a while to boot. And the setup took a little while. It wanted to update the software and everything, and then to create the array. It does automatically create, at least for me, it did create the SHR, which is the Synology Hybrid RAID, which is basically their version of RAID 5. It's supposedly better for a number of reasons. It automatically created or put the disks in that configuration. So if you wanted, or if I wanted a different configuration, either a standard RAID type or their SHR2, which is, I think, basically RAID 6, then I would have to actually remove that volume it created automatically and set up a new one. I'm going to stick with the SHR1. I'm fine with basically it's RAID 5. It's their version of RAID 5, so I'm going to stick with that. Like I said, I've got backups, offsite backups for files and stuff like that. So even if 2 drives were to fail, or if something were to happen and data were to be corrupted across to the array, it wouldn't be that big of a deal. It comes down to an inconvenience mostly. So, and I want the most storage I can get. So anyway. So I was able to get the old system up. The old system, I'll note again, was a FreeNAS, and it was running a Core 2 quad. Those 2.6 gigahertz, and 8 gigs of RAM, which is not the recommended. I think the minimum recommended for FreeNAS with like a ZFS data set is 16. I never really had any problems. The problems I have that led to me replacing it were not related to anything with FreeNAS. It was simply, again, a motherboard failure, and then, of course, the hard drive failures. When 2 of the 4 drives fail, and they were all basically purchased around the same time, I'm going to go ahead and replace them all for one thing. 2, to expand storage. Again, I'm basically doubling the amount of storage I have, going from 2 terabyte drives to 4 terabyte drives. And then also going to a more power efficient system with the Synology, and it turns out, at least anecdotally, I will say, a faster system. So I took some measurements really quick just to, I made this a while ago. I think I've got a post on my site about it. Really simple. Just a simple electrical box you can get from Home Depot, and some brackets and a terminal strip. But this basically splits one side of the connection. You would plug this into the outlet, and then you would plug your device into this, and then these terminals right here, these screws give you a place to clip your meter on, so you can easily measure the current. Now you can get like a kilowatt or other device, but this gives this was just quick and dirty, and that's all it's meant for, is for quick and dirty measurements. So we have the FreeNAS here and the Synology here. Just some different measurements that I'll run through really quick. Boot for the FreeNAS box used between 0.8 and 0.9 amps. Transferring 0.8 amps, copying from the FreeNAS. This was a 2.9 gig file. It's a 2.9 gig ISO. Topped out at about 63.35 megabytes a second, and copying to this was interesting. I was surprised by this low number, but that was just terrible. Now, the caveat with these transfer measurements is that, again, there's at least 2 drives that are failing, and failing in that they're making strange, not happy noises. So these numbers might not be the most accurate, considering that it's in a state of failure. plus whatever's going on with the motherboard. I had to try booting it several times and power cycle it several times before I got it to boot back up into a state where I could actually try some measurements. And then getting the power measured was a little bit tricky as well. So anyway, so that 12.67 megabytes, very low, not impressive at all. Took quite a while to copy that file over. As far as the power, basically at idle, and even during a transfer, the transfer didn't cause it to go that much up, which isn't that surprising. The FreeNAS, I don't have any sort of power management on this or anything, so it doesn't shut drives down or anything like that. But basically, during a transfer, and even just sitting there, it uses about 96 watts. The Synology, at boot, it started at about 0.16 and went as high as 0.60 amps. During a transfer, used 57. Its idle was a little bit less. Now, this isn't, again, because these are quick and dirty measurements, it was doing a check on the drives. When it creates an array, it does like a consistency check on the drives to make sure that the array drives are okay and the array is healthy. So it was doing that, and I think it was hovering about 12 or 15% CPU usage during this. I just wanted to get these measurements done, so I didn't wait for that to finish, because it'll take a little while for that to finish. So anyway, so used 0.51 amps during idle, and it went up a little bit during a transfer. The data transfer speeds are very telling. Copy from was 101 megabytes, copy to was 95 megabytes. So definitely a big improvement. Not the write speed, which is the copy to. The write speed is definitely slower, but not by much. So that's respectable. Both these systems were connected over a gigabit switch. The FreeNAS and the Synology both have gigabit network ports. They were connected through a gigabit switch, and these transfers were going from a computer that has a gigabit switch to and from a computer that has a gigabit switch or a gigabit network port, and has an SSD and stuff. So fairly decent performance machine where these were being copied from and copied to. The power is what's the most impressive, I guess. 96 watts for the FreeNAS. That's basically its idle / transfer state. The idle power usage for the FreeNAS, again, not entirely a fair measure, just because it was doing that consistency check, so it was using probably more power than it would be at idle. But 60 watts, so that's a 46% difference between the two. And this will actually improve. The Synology has the ability, and it does it by default, I believe. I don't think I had to go in and configure it, but it will idle the drives. It'll basically put the drives to sleep in an idle state. The FreeNAS can do the same thing. If I recall correctly, and this may be a few versions back, it may have improved in the newer versions of FreeNAS, but the last time I tried any sort of putting the drives to sleep, I had issues, performance issues mostly, and issues with it. It seemed like waking those drives up. That may have changed. You know, it's just sort of anecdotal at this point. And who knows what the Synology? I haven't read anything on anyone having any problems with it putting the drives to sleep or its power management or anything like that. But that remains to be seen. All right, so that was a look at the Synology DS416j. Again, I want to make clear this was not a comparison between Synology and FreeNAS. It was just a general look at the Synology, and just comparing what I had before. And these numbers, especially these data transfer numbers, may not even be completely accurate from what I was getting before. I've measured this before. I don't recall when it was in a better state. I don't recall what those numbers are. Again, in the FreeNAS, in my box, older drives compared to what I have in the Synology, first of all, and at least two of those drives were in a failure state. So not a comparison of FreeNAS and Synology, but for the price of the DS416j, I don't think you could build anything cheaper at the 240 or 260 price range. And for the performance that I'm actually seeing, not too bad. Again, if you're going to be running Plex, if you're going to be needing to transcode media, I've heard mixed things about the DS416j, but I'm not going to be doing that. I do run Plex, but it runs on another system, so not something that I'm worried about. I'm mostly worried about just the system working. Obviously, the interface is nice on the Synology. It gets out of your way for the most part. Very nice. It's quite speedy. Other than its slow boot time, it's quite snappy on the interface, and of course the data transfer rates. It's not slow. The ones QNAP I've had experience with, the data transfer rates were fairly atrocious, and that was even on a gigabit network with fairly high-end drives. So, and these are the I'll link the drives I used. I don't remember the model name, but they're NAS class drives from Seagate. Not the best, not the fastest you can get. It would be fun to see what you would get from SSDs, but SSDs for this type of setup and the amount of storage you get are just still prohibitively expensive. Anyway. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and be sure and subscribe to get notified when I make a new video. Thanks for watching.